And a bunch of us, none of us thought that Twitter was going to be successful.
Right.
Like, the team at Twitter that made Twitter, we didn't go to the fanciest schools. We were really weird. And we all brought different things to it. And that's what made it work. And so Twitter and a dozen other product ideas came out of those hackathons. And so in early days, when you look at Twitter, you're like, oh, I could build this in a day. And it's like, we did too.
Oh.
Amazingly, there is a video of the demo of Twitter when it was 6 hours old. The funny thing is, Dick Costello's first tweet after joining as COO literally says, joining as COO of Twitter, task 1, undermine CEO and replace them. Which is exactly what he did. So I grew up in an environment where there was always a lot of hustle. There was always a lot of like, you've got to invent it yourself and figure out what you were doing. I'm not sure I'm an entrepreneur because I'm particularly adept at starting companies and keeping them alive, or I'm particularly bad at being an employee for other people. They're like, this is the stupidest thing. And then instead of calling it audio blogging, someone else said, well, you know, it's kind of like casting or sending audio to your iPod. Right. So I'll call it podcasting.
Is that where the word actually came from? Amazing. And why did you leave?
I left because I felt like startups, you burn out in startups. And 2, I felt like we walked away from podcasting. Be adventurous and try things and be willing to fail, and don't have the same path as everybody else, because having the same path as everyone else leads to boring companies that aren't very interesting. And so do something unique and different, and that'll give you unique insight.
Just before we get started, if you're enjoying the podcast, can you please make sure you subscribe or follow my channel? This helps me out tremendously. Hello, Rabble. Great to have you on the show.
Thank you so much. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. And you're over in New Zealand at the moment.
Yep.
Enjoying life there. You've traveled around quite a bit, and you've done a hell of a lot in the industry. So I'm really looking forward to talking to you today. And I know you also were like the first person in Twitter and the person that brought in Jack Dorsey, and we'll go into that a bit later. But you've done so many other things as well that I'm really excited to hear all about that. And this podcast, even though you're highly successful, I would say, and success is always, has different meanings. This podcast is for early stage startup founders so that they can learn from the failures of even the most successful people, because there is, I'm sure you'd agree, there is no such thing as overnight success anyway. So that's for sure. So I guess to start off, if you could just give our listeners a bit of a snapshot of your background and your journey leading up to where you are now.
So I grew up in California, and I started working in startups during my summers in high school in the early 1990s, and was always very drawn to the technology and startup industry. And then I dropped out of university to found my first company.
What were you studying at uni?
I was studying physics.
Okay. And how come you dropped out? Like, wasn't your passion? Or
what I realized was I could be a physicist, and I would spend 12 years studying physics, and then I would get to advance the field for a couple of years in my late 20s and early 30s, and then my contribution stopped. So if you look at there are very few people in physics and math who do interesting work their whole career. Mm-hmm. The entire field is based on a tremendous amount that you have to learn, and then you get to spend a few years doing original research, and then the rest of your career is training the next generation of physicists to do their couple of years of original research. And so I didn't want to do that. Like, I enjoyed physics. I enjoyed the math.
Yeah.
But I didn't want to spend my entire 20s studying so that I could do my little teeny advancement in the world of physics. I wanted to have a bigger impact in the world. And I wanted a career that let me build stuff and work that wasn't limited to a couple years. And so that's why I had, even though I had, worked in startups in Silicon Valley during my summers in high school, I very quickly decided to go back to that and had a side project which attracted a little bit of seed investing, and I very quickly dropped out and did that instead.
And what was that side project?
Oh, it was a company called Meta Events. We did software as a service events calendars, and so that you could figure out, what events are happening in your town, public events calendars. And we sold it to a company any day that very quickly got bought by Palm. And so I discovered myself working as part of a 3,000 person engineering team at Palm when I was 21. And that was not where I wanted to be.
You obviously have a very entrepreneurial spirit. And I always, talking to so many entrepreneurs and being one myself, I think we are a certain sort of breed.
Yeah.
But just going back to even your childhood and that, like, is there something in there? Like, tell us a bit about your early childhood and growing up, and is there something there that you think that made you want to be an entrepreneur or made you, be the way that you are?
Well, it's interesting. No one in my family had regular jobs.
Mm-hmm.
My dad was an engineer. My mom was an architect.
Yeah.
And they both found their own path. And no one said, oh, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go work for a company and it's going to be a 9-to-5 thing. And that's going to be my career. And I know that I've got a steady paycheck. So I grew up in an environment where there was always a lot of hustle. There was always a lot of you've got to invent it yourself and figure out what you were doing. And so, my mom worked as an architect. She was also an adjunct professor at the state university where I grew up in California. Yep. But that idea that what we're doing is, you got to create it yourself is essential. And sometimes I think about it. I think about my career as an entrepreneur, and I'm like, I'm not sure I'm an entrepreneur because I'm particularly adept at starting companies and keeping them alive, or I'm particularly bad at being an employee for other people.
Maybe it's a combination of both. I think I'm a bit like you. Yeah. Really interesting. And so that was your first startup. And then how many other startups have you been involved with? And I'd like to hear about one that maybe didn't go where you thought it was going to go, and why that happened, and what lessons were learned from that as well.
Absolutely. Well, the first startup we had, the called Meta Events, we sold it for $500,000.
Right.
And for 2 college dropouts in our, early 20s, just old enough to drink in the United States, that was a nice success.
You didn't drink it all, did you?
No,
Okay.
but it wasn't a home run.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
It wasn't a home run, and I think that, like, I can't keep track of the number of other startups I've done. Like, you keep trying, and you keep working on side projects, and you keep kind of trying to figure out which ones are going to come together and how they're going to collaborate. Yeah. And then, some of them take off. And I think there must have been half a dozen different companies incorporated and funded on one level or another. And then the craziest thing is, we'll get into the audio and Twitter thing, but the startup that actually gave me a little exit, enough to buy a house and take a couple years off with my kids.
Yeah.
I never intended that to be a startup at all.
All right. Well, tell us that story.
So, after I spent time at Odeo and Twitter, and then I went and spent some time at Yahoo working with the Flickr team to try and build out social media with Yahoo. And then I decided that I was going to be a digital nomad, so I moved to Uruguay and was working remotely before it was a thing that people were working remotely.
Yeah.
And so Yahoo said, "Oh no, you can't do that." So I just started doing consulting, and I accidentally built out a consulting business where one thing led to another, and then we had 17 people, and we had an office and a conference and a whole world of activities. And I ended up selling the consultancy to Digital Garage out of Japan, and we built out their consultancy business and sold it to Pivotal. And at the time, I was like, I am not doing another startup. I'm not seeking funding. I'm just going to do consulting things, and then we're going to build some of our own products on the side. And it ended up being an exit that I didn't expect at all. I went into those conversations literally expecting business development, expecting collaboration, and they're like, "Why don't we acquire you?"
All right. Yeah, it's interesting. And why did you choose Uruguay?
So the real reason I chose Uruguay is that my ex was from there, and she wanted to move back home, and I just, it felt like a night, I didn't know much about it.
Yeah.
Then later I learned that Uruguay is actually a very well-positioned country for startups. There's tremendous infrastructure. There's 5G over the whole country. Every kid in the country gets a laptop. Yeah. Programming is taught in primary schools. And there's a bunch of tax benefits for tech companies. Yeah. And so it's become a little bit of a tech hub of people doing work. And and it's worked economically. Uruguay, 20 years ago, was a relatively poor country. Yeah. And now it's a solidly middle-income country. And poverty is almost entirely eliminated in the country, which is very different than the neighboring countries in South America.
Yeah, I know. I mean, my wife is from Argentina and my son-in-law from Uruguay. And I visited Uruguay about 7 years ago. And very lovely people. And yeah, big difference between the two. And I always compare Australia and New Zealand. You've got that real competitiveness, but New Zealand has like 3 million people. And in the arts, in sport and everything, they're really up there. Like, they're amazing for the amount of people they have. And I think Uruguay is the same. Like, if you look at sport, they've won the Soccer World Cup, twice or 3 times. And they're right up there. And I think it's 3 million people as well. So, it's interesting. It would be a nice place to live, I think. It's interesting. All right, so just a question around that. Actually, the first podcast I did with a mate of mine, Shane, and he was saying with business, with startups, it's once you have money, then it's a lot easier to set up another business or another startup and be successful.
Yeah.
What do you think about that as well?
Well, once you have money, then you have connections, and then you have runway, and then you can finance things.
Yeah.
When you're trying to do it without money, it's incredibly hard to bootstrap.
Yeah.
So, and that's one of the reasons that being in Silicon Valley does make sense. Like in the San Francisco Bay Area, access to super savvy, risk tolerant capital is tremendous. Like I had a company fail.
Yeah.
And I went to my VCs and I said, I'm very sorry. We didn't get product market fit. We can't raise another round. We're shutting down. And you know what one of my VCs said?
What'd they say?
You don't really need to jump on a call with me to explain why your business failed. An email is sufficient to say the business failed and you're going to start another one. and that is like, that's a mindset of someone who's like, I'm going to take risk after risk after risk. And I'm betting in you. And if you didn't succeed this time, you'll do it next time.
Well, that's fantastic. I think that's more a US sort of mentality.
Very much a US mentality. It's why it's the secret sauce. Because it's not like American companies have less regulation. It's not like it's cheap to run a company in the US. Like the cost of labor, the cost of compliance, the cost of healthcare and housing and everything in California is really high. It is a very expensive place to run a startup.
Yeah.
But you have access to the capital. And interesting things like here, I'm based in New Zealand now. No one knows that I'm based in New Zealand. Or they think it's an oddity. But as far as they're concerned, I'm really in San Francisco.
Right.
I've just found, a remote place to work from. And so, one of the things that we're seeing in this global environment is like those investors in the Bay Area, they don't care where you're based. They care about how you collaborate and what you're doing. And so finding that risk tolerant capital that can give you a leg up, help move things forward, and understand where you're coming from is really important.
Yeah, you're a startup in Australia and you haven't got that capital. What would you do and how would you approach investors and which investors would you approach? What would you recommend?
Well, use your personal networks. So if
I haven't got any. I'm young. I'm 22 years old. I'm just starting out. I got this brilliant idea. The startups is fantastic, and a lot of people are excited about it, and people are willing to pay for it. What should I do? I need the capital to get going.
I would do something that builds your network. 500 Startups is an amazing accelerator, and they pull people in and have them spend 3 months in San Francisco or Menlo Park or wherever it is down in the valley. And the entire purpose of that is to maximize your networking.
Okay.
And they set it up so that you don't need a long-term visa. You're not actually legally working in the United States, everything else. Go and meet people. One of the differences between Australia, New Zealand, and the US is it's not considered great to sell yourself.
Yes,
they're worried about the tall poppy syndrome. They're worried about pitching themselves. And so what you need to do if you're going to go raise some money in Silicon Valley is realize that you go to a party and you work the party and you pitch it and you sell yourself hard, like why you're interesting.
Yeah.
And why you're bringing this other perspective. Now, a balance of capital is important. Like if you have some local investors and the Silicon Valley folks, that's better. But their network, a good investor brings a tremendous network and brings a lot of resources.
Yeah.
the investors that I really love working with, I love working with Bloomberg Beta as an early stage investor because they run lots of events. They run them in person in New York and San Francisco, but they also run them online. They record them all. They do introductions. They maintain a Rolodex. I need something, and I can go to the Bloomberg Beta list that they have, and they get it to me. When Silicon Valley Bank collapsed, that Slack room with the other founders from Bloomberg was essential for us being able to figure it out. And it's not just that. First Round Capital does it really well. A16Z does it well. Union Square Ventures does it well. There's a whole bunch that do it well. But finding those investors that aren't just, oh, we'll give you connections or we'll give you capital, but they cultivate a community. And the other good part about that is, like, when I've had companies fail, none of those investors are upset about the failure. Instead, what they say is, fantastic. Now, here are all these other portfolio companies that are doing great and desperate for your skills.
Right. Yeah. So it's all about you. And like, I think the number one thing for investors is the actual team themselves and the experience they have and what they've done in the past. Yeah, that's really interesting. So you said you had a few companies that have failed. And so what would be the biggest one, and walk us through why that happened so we can learn from that?
That's a great question. So I would say, so the craziest story is actually my current company.
Right.
Which failed. Like, so we raised a pre-seed round in 2018, $1.5 million to build a decentralized social media platform. But it was 2018. So it wasn't until Elon Musk took over Twitter in 2022 that anyone believed us that this would be a problem. Like, for the first 4 years of the company, everybody's like, I don't see you getting it. So our first and biggest problem was we made bad technology choices. We made technology choices that required a lot of technology work before we could start validating the customer need.
Is that because you're using the blockchain?
It wasn't a blockchain, but it was a blockchain adjacent project.
Okay.
It used a lot of decentralized tech and everything else. And when we talk to users, they're only concerned about owning their identity and relationships after they've built up an audience. Before they've built up an audience, they don't care about those things. And so, and Twitter and Facebook and others, everybody complained about it, but people kept using it. There was no desire to search for it. So we built all this decentralized tech when what people really wanted was the ability to monetize or the ability to build up an audience, the ability to produce it. And they were perfectly happy. And so you see companies that came out of the same era. Substack used a bunch of money to subsidize bringing authors on board and was really successful. Gina over at Mighty Networks focused on the trainers, these niche communities. Like, there were a bunch of companies in the same space who figured it out. So we failed. So I went to my investors. I said, we've run out of money. They said, you don't have traction. I'm not going to give you money. And I let everyone go, but I didn't quite shut down the company. And all of my investors, this is the one who said, shut it down. They're like, I've never seen a zombie company come back. You can go to zombie mode because you don't want to give up on the dream, but they don't come back. And then one of our investors came back to me and said, actually, I really like your idea. I'm willing to fund it for a couple years to make sure that you guys are able to come. Like, I believe in the vision. we've done well enough in the other companies we've done. We will give you the funding to keep operating.
Awesome.
And we spun it back up. And then we kept working on it. We built it, and we had to pivot a few times, switch protocols and things like that. And it meant that we had a good product that was polished around that. When Elon Musk took off and when, Twitter imploded and we had all these things, we were able to build this new product and this new protocol, Noster, and it's taken off. Now, it's not to the moon yet, but there's 700,000 people using the protocol.
Wow,
and
that's impressive.
There's a whole ecosystem of apps, and it's exactly the vision we pitched in 2018. But the timing wasn't right in 2018.
Yeah, timing's so important, isn't it? When I started my VR training startup, it was 2017. It was really early days, and people just didn't get what VR was. It was such a hard sell, and also like the headsets. I remember doing a demo once, putting phones in these headsets, and like 1 out of 7 worked, and all these sort of things going on, and you didn't have the technology then. And US is always ahead of us. So, like Walmart, they started training 2 million people with VR because they saw the vision, they saw how well it worked. But in Australia, it was so difficult to sell. So its timing is so important. And then, of course, COVID as well.
Timing is so important. And in our case, what our investors said when we put it into zombie mode was, you need to find someone who believes. And that's such a hard search because you can't be like, hey, do you believe? Do you believe enough to give us a couple $1 million and engage with us? And eventually we did. And through networks and through personal connections and through people who, I sort of met at parties and conferences and things like that, we got to know each other, we collaborated, we built it, and it worked. Yeah. And we were able to, go from having raised, $1.4 million US back in 2018 to raising $5 million this past October.
Right.
But it, my investors are like, they haven't met anyone who is able to be so frugal. And the point was there are times in which we're frugal and we're really, really lean about how our burn rates are because we're waiting for the right time. We're doing the work. We're doing the prep. We're doing the research. We're building the networks, but it's not the right moment in the market. And so we need to survive long enough. Yeah. Kind of like those animals that only survive when there's a rainstorm in the desert and they know how to sort of burrow into the ground. Yeah. That's what we did. And it worked, but it was a total bet.
The whole social media, it's huge now, obviously for years and years. I actually, in 2017, I worked for an organization, TAFE Digital, that does training to, hundreds of thousands of people here in Australia in vocational education. And I started social media in that time. And it was funny because I was looking at, will we do a MySpace page or Facebook? Went with Facebook. So that was 2008, I think. And so I grew that social media presence and for online learning, the Facebook groups were fantastic. I actually did some research and, the completion rates went right up with that. But now it's I don't know, you've probably seen the show, The Social Dilemma.
Oh, yeah.
It's really, the algorithms is causing, I heard a podcast about a week ago, and this person, I think he was a philosopher, and he was saying, up to 15 years ago, society was based on groups or on church or on, family. Now, the last 15 years has been on algorithms. And, a lot of people are saying, and what I see is our algorithms are causing that division because you only see what you believe and you don't see anything else. And what are your thoughts on that? Having been a person that actually started Twitter, I mean, I know you got out early, but what are your thoughts on the social media space at the moment?
I mean, social media is complicated because on some level, it solves so many problems that we have. It democratizes the public sphere.
Yeah.
And it should be no surprise to anyone that when we democratize the public sphere, we get a bunch of amazing things and a whole lot of things that we pretended didn't exist.
Yeah.
You know, so if you think about the pre-internet era, even before blogs or things like that, the amount of resources you needed to make a magazine, to pull together a community on a topic and get that distributed and get people, it required a lot of capital. And so we democratized all this stuff. And we've got everyone. And so some of that stuff is great and some of that stuff is terrible. You know, the people with anorexia and bulimia before social media mostly thought they were alone. Mostly thought no one else did this. And so with social media, now people learn and lots of people get out of it and lots of people get support. But some people use it to advocate for bulimia and for anorexia and help each other.
Yeah.
And so, we don't focus on the people doing the thing, like dealing with social media in the good way. Now, the other issue is that the only business model that we've developed for social media is this kind of advertising model. And we developed these algorithms that do engagement. And algorithms are fine, but we need agency over them. And the problem is the algorithms are tuned to keep us engaged in a very passive way. The psychological studies about social media show that the Instagram Reels, TikTok type feed of one video after the other, it's kind of like a casino. And it makes you feel worse. But the social media where you're engaged in a conversation and you post something and people comment,
i.e. podcasts,
that is really affirming and psychologically beneficial. But that's not the thing that advertisers need. So advertisers hate Discord and Reddit, and they don't like Pinterest much either. And so, but those are all super collaborative social media apps. Yeah. Whereas, advertisers, they don't like WhatsApp. They don't like Signal. They don't like all of these collaborative, socially redeeming platforms because they're not getting you to feel bad about yourself and buy things. And so we have a world where the advertising model is driving an engagement model that is super passive. And sometimes that also pushes people off into crazy. So, all these studies about YouTube and Instagram and TikTok about how you can get further and further out into this world of conspiracy theories and things like that, because the algorithms just want to keep you engaged. And if you're, discovering the secrets of vaccines causing autism or something like that, it makes you more and more excited. And so what we need to do is give users agency over these algorithms and say they are both powerful and risky, that they're important but dangerous. And, we don't let people run airlines without some safety regulations. We don't let people produce food. We don't let people run a restaurant without there being a health and safety inspection.
Yeah.
The health and safety inspection at a restaurant doesn't have to give away your recipes, but you do get a rating. And if it's unsafe, we don't let you run a restaurant. And so
exactly,
we don't have any kind of regulation around social media, which says, document your work. But if we don't, but removing the algorithm doesn't work. All these studies with Facebook from the Stanford Internet Research Agency, all those folks show us that if you give people the same thing without the algorithm, with just a chronological feed, what happens is they switch to other apps that have the algorithms.
Making the algorithms in a way that people, like they're more sort of ethical, and they're not just going to, make you see more and more violence, for example, just because it's making them more money. I think it just all comes back to monetization and just the need just to only make money instead of this is a tool for the good of humanity, which it can be, and it is in many cases. But it's all back to making the dollar again, isn't it? Just if they're only thinking about that, and it's pretty sad. And plus, I guess they're so powerful that it's really hard to get them to change because they've got so much money. They got the best lawyers, and they have huge influence. They're probably more influence than most governments, I would imagine.
But we don't we're in the process of seeing a shift right now around advertising because advertising is about to stop working. Because we know that as individuals, we don't trust ads. Not very much. But we trust other people we engage with a lot. And we now know that the new emerging AI stuff is good enough that we can't determine whether or not that's a real person or not. So the incentives are for advertisers to switch to making AI bots that make social media that is engaging and supportive and you feel connection to. And then when you say, okay, I'm going to go buy a house or I'm going to buy a dishwasher or a new computer, those AI bots start talking to you about that. And maybe you know that they're an AI and maybe you don't. But you can know that they're an AI. And if you trust them from other things they've said to you and you've engaged with, you'll trust them on the recommendation for what computer to buy.
It's fascinating. And the whole AI area is just opening up. Let's say, it's like the beginning of the internet.
Absolutely.
And in one of your videos, you mentioned the importance of adapting communication modes with new media during major shifts. So do you think this applies to AI? And what advice would you give to early startup founders in navigating these evolving communication platforms?
One of the most interesting conversations that we had around the office when we created Twitter, and I don't remember who was talking about it, but a bunch of the people on the team were sort of having a conversation, sort of while drinking coffee on a break between hacking on things. And we had this realization that the human interactions, the human behavior doesn't change. So if you're looking at a technology shift, and in Twitter's case, the shift was from we use the internet on a desktop computer to we use it on a smartphone. Initially, Twitter was just SMS, but the reason Twitter took off is because the iPhone came out within a year of Twitter launching, and it was a perfect platform for the iPhone. One, the mobile web worked really well on Twitter, but two, then the apps worked really well. And so what we were thinking about was what human behavior and social behavior has worked in the past, and how would it work on this new technology that's emerging in this new paradigm? And so we looked at the way, we had used university systems where you could sort of do status updates, and were chat systems, and the way IRC worked, and the way blogging worked, but also the way in which rural radio stations will let you call in and leave a message that then goes out to their friends, or newspapers let you write in little short letters, like little short notes that then got sent out to everyone else in the community. And so Twitter essentially was that aspect of what's a really short, easy way of keeping people up to date with what's going on with me.
Yeah.
And make it super seamless and super easy. But it scaled it not from the thing you say with your friends or like sending them a quick note to anybody in the world could then view that. And so the human behavior is essentially the same. The technology lets us change the nature and scale and the affordances on it. And so when you look at new emerging things, we have the new Apple Vision Pro with the spatial computing. Remember, people don't change. Our technology does. We evolved over hundreds of thousands of years to have certain kinds of needs, of feeling inclusion, of having enough, of feeling connection, of finding love, of finding friendship, of taking care of people, of feeling like you're winning, of all these different essential human behaviors. Sitting around the campfire. Those things stay the same, but the technology changes. And so what does it mean to meet the human needs that have existed for 200,000 years in the era of AI? How can AI shift the underlying rules?
That's a great question. And I guess the people that work that out, they can have the new Twitter, so to speak.
Absolutely. And almost never do the companies and media and platforms survive these major technology shifts. The amazing thing about Meta is that they were able to transition Facebook from a desktop web app to mobile. But Flickr, for example, was the dominant photo sharing social media app. They weren't able to go from web to mobile. What happened was Instagram took over. And so, most of the reason that Facebook, Meta, bought Instagram, WhatsApp, Oculus, and all these other companies is they know that they can't make the transition with Facebook. And so that's their bet. And now they spent billions on trying to do, virtual reality stuff. And now they've switched to doing AI, and they have such a cash cow that they can do that. So one thing that we get to think about when we think about building new things is, how do I do the same thing that I did before, but with AI? Like, how does AI change it? How does AI change loneliness and friendship and learning and falling in love and knowing what's going on in the world so that you have something to talk about other people, or are feeling good about yourself, or making money buying and selling things, or your day-to-day job, or or taking care, raising kids, taking care of people, taking care of your family, finding a place to live, engaging in sort of social events, the equivalent of church. If you don't go to church, like that social activity still needs to happen. And we're going to now use AI as one of these fundamental substrates to make it work. And so, I'm a programmer, and I use, Copilot and GPT-4 in my work all the time. The programming is still the same.
Yeah.
But the debugging isn't. Like, it used to be when you were programming that you spent like 5% of your time writing new stuff and 95% of the time figuring out why that new stuff you wrote doesn't work.
Yeah. Yeah.
And now it's like 10% of the time is debugging.
Yeah.
Because you have this
Yeah.
intelligent chatbot that can read your code and your entire application and say, oh, now I got another idea. Maybe we should try this, or maybe you should try that. Like, that's why people don't go to Stack Overflow now, because you can have this conversation with things. And you still have to think about programming. You still have to understand what you're building and how you're building it and the way they interact, and you have to understand it. But the syntax not working and all of those stupid bugs, those go away.
Yeah, it could even be sometimes just the space that you don't know is there can stop the whole thing from working. All sorts of stuff. I know.
And with Copilot, that doesn't happen anymore.
Yeah.
And so, what does that mean in every other industry? And one of the most amazing things is how slowly the adoption of these things is. It's much slower than we think.
Okay, because they say AI is one of the fastest things that have been adopted, way more than so many other technologies.
But businesses are adopting it really slowly, because businesses are, they have ways of working, they have ways of collaborating, they have things being done, and that shift on how to change and how to adopt it is powerful. It's like, what if I used AI to track down this stuff? What if I used AI as a power motivator? One of the interesting things is the studies around AI is that it does not have a massive effect on the best performers. Okay. So the people who are really good at their job, AI doesn't help them very much. What AI does a great job is taking the bottom half of performers of any different task or thing and making them equivalent to the median performer.
Yeah.
And so when we think about it, is like, what fields have a bunch of people who needed a ton of time training and learning things and bringing up to speed and continue to do the job, but not very well? That's where it's AI, interesting, giving them an AI tool so that those people can hit average.
Yeah.
That's the benefit.
I mean, I used it in my startup, and when it came out, when I started using it, I thought, wow, this is amazing. And then I started introducing it to the team and said, look, I want you guys to use this, learn how to use it. Don't be threatened by it. You'll actually become a lot more productive with it. So I want you to use it and to get good at it, and not be threatened by, oh, you're going to lose your job because of it. No, they can just become a lot more productive. So that was the tack that I found worked. Yeah, it's really interesting space. So just going back to Twitter, you spoke a little bit about that. So let's hear about the Twitter story, how it started. So you were the first person there, and so tell us about it. It's quite exciting, really.
Sure. So I had sold the first company, Meta Events, when I dropped out of college in 2000, and then there was the big .com crash, and so there was no work in startups for a few years, and I traveled all around the world, volunteering with activist groups all over the place, helping set up computer labs for people all over the world. And then in 2004, some friends got together and they said, hey, there's an election. What can we do with technology in the election to prevent George Bush from getting reelected? And so we started playing with phones, and we started playing with hacking things, and we built a whole bunch of things that helped the young Democrats, like, send you text messages where you can go vote and reminding people that they should go vote because it was election day, and a bunch of things like that. And we put that together and we built that in San Francisco. And then around the same time, a bunch of the people working on the blogger team at Google had gone around and said, well, instead of journalists covering the election, why don't we give a blog to each politician and have them just talk directly? And at that time, a bunch of people were looking at how to make blogs better. Like, what can we do with this RSS feed? And this guy, Dave Weiner, said, well, why don't I just make a link to an MP3 file? And that was a super simple idea. And he's like, if we make a link to an MP3 file, instead of a feed of blog posts, you could have a feed of MP3s, these audio files. And what if instead of putting music in these MP3 files, we read out our blog post?
Right.
And so it was called audio blogging. And everybody made fun of it. They're like, this is the stupidest thing. And then instead of calling it audio blogging, someone else said, well, you know, it's kind of like casting or sending audio to your iPod.
Right.
So I'll call it podcasting.
Is that where the word actually came from? Amazing. Wow.
Because there had been a startup in the late 90s called Pointcast that would it seems like a terrible idea now, but you installed the app and it would be a screensaver on your computer and it would show you the weather and stock and news and then ads while your computer was on a screensaver.
Right.
And so they called it Pointcast. And so there was this idea of using casting, of like sending things, sort of spells and sending it. And podcasting term comes from the fact that it was like, well, we're sending it to the iPod. But if you called it like iPodcasting or something, then Apple would sue you.
Yeah, for sure.
So they just called it podcasting. And so in 2004, one of the guys doing this this audio blogging was named Noah Glass. And he's like, I think podcasting could be a real thing.
He was spot on with that.
Yeah. And he was friends with Evan Williams. And so he went to Ev and he said, hey, Ev, why don't you give me some investment money so we can do this, audio blogging.
Yeah.
And Ev had accidentally sold his company Blogger to Google. And I say accidentally because Blogger, Pyro was the company, but Blogger was kind of in a similar situation to my company a few years ago. Like people were using the app, but they couldn't find additional investors and they ran out of money. And so he got to the point where he was just like, can anyone donate some money? We need to raise another $1,000 a month in order so that the servers don't go offline. And they'd received venture capital backing and stuff, but, had no business model. So 2003, 2002, 2001, I can't remember exactly when, Google had acquired them because they're like, well, we need blogs in our search engine. Like Google didn't know what they were acquiring. And and the culture fit between the Blogger team and the Google team didn't work at all. The Google team is very, the Google folks are very analytical, very data driven, Google's not very good at social software. And the Blogger team is all about narrative and story and people and connection.
Yeah, of course.
So the Blogger team had to take this commute down to Silicon Valley because everyone lived in San Francisco. And so they were interested in blogs, and podcasting are kind of blog adjacent things. And so they started listening to podcasts in the Google bus going back and forth. And so when Noah went to them and said, hey, why don't you give me some seed capital and we can build a startup around podcasting. And now, at the time, there was no startups around podcasting. At the time, it was like we were the very first, like, there should be commercialization of podcasting. And so Ev said, yeah, great, I'll give you some seed capital. And, around that time, he quit Google and just said, I hate the commute and everything else. And we started building it. And so I, started working with Noah. We started working in cafes. I met Ev. There was, no one else in the company. Eventually we moved into Noah's living room, and then Noah's wife kicked us out of her living room. And then Ev got a new apartment. And so but he didn't want to give up the lease of the old apartment. So we moved into his old apartment. It was a very teeny little 2-bed, like 2-room apartment, like very, very small apartment. And we basically built the first consumer podcasting company. So we built a tool for downloading the podcasts and putting them on your iPod, or listening them on the desktop, or listening to them web. And we built tools for recording them. Now we're using Riverside, but we built a little studio tool that let you record podcasts.
Awesome. Well, thank you for that, because of you guys, we're able to do what we do.
And we went out to National Public Radio in the U.S. and we said, hey, you guys have all these radio programs. Yeah. You should do podcasting. And they're like, yeah, no one's going to listen to a radio program on your iPod. We had some luck. So one, Ev is pretty well known because he'd worked on Blogger. And Chris Anderson from TED got in touch with him and said, hey, what are you working on? And he's like, well, I've got this sort of startup. We're kind of doing this podcast thing. And we were sort of in stealth, like no one knew about us. And so Chris said, well, why don't you launch it at TED? And so we were able to launch it at TED and launch it and we got interviewed in the New York Times, and we got a lot of attention, a lot of hype. And this was a down cycle in startups. So there was not much funding going on. And we were able to raise $5 million in VC funding. And in 2005, $5 million was a lot of money. Yeah. We were blown away at how successful we were at raising that money. And we, Ev and Noah and some of the other folks went down to Apple and said, hey, this podcasting thing is a big deal. Apple, you should do something with podcasts. Let's partner.
Right.
And Apple was like, maybe. Well, at the same time, in secret, they were going around with a crack team working really, really quickly and hard to integrate podcasting into the iPod and iTunes.
Really?
And so Apple did a great job. Like they went in and they kicked butt. And they launched, like we did something that was beautiful and polished and really nice and a beautiful interface. And you could explore all the podcasts and you could listen to them and you expose the back catalog. But Apple made something that worked so simply and worked end to end. They had a simple directory. They integrated it in iTunes. They put it on the iPod and it knew which ones you'd listen to. And then deleted the old ones because the listening behavior on an iPod is different for podcasting.
Yeah.
And so we were then faced with a situation, which is we were the number 2. And most people just, this was before the iPhone came out, before Android came out. People were listening to these stuff on their iPod. You had to plug it in your computer. You had to sync it. You had to have this app. And what happened was you don't want to be number 2.
No.
You don't want to be the also ran. And so we had an idea, which is like, Well, we have $3.5 million, $4 million in the bank. We have this team. We like the team. We like the office. We like working together. What else could we do?
Right.
And so we actually made a very intentional process of pivoting. And we did a big brainstorming process of what have you liked in the past? What was cool? What was interesting? How do you collaborate? And that process we explored visual voicemail, we explored emerging web video, we explored, other phone stuff, we explored what we could do with text messaging. And one of the things that we explored was we tried products that people liked and had used. And so one of those products was an open source tool that a couple of us in the office had been using called TextMob. And TextMob isn't Twitter. But it was a way for you to send text messages out to a group of people and get status updates, mostly used during protests. So one of those things we used in the 2004 election protests, and we used in a bunch of different protests. And, it didn't have a short code, and you had to join specific groups. And so we set up a process in Odeo of every Wednesday would be hackathon day. And we made it so that you had to join a new team each Wednesday. So no repeating of teams. You had to collaborate with everybody else. And we would get up at 9 a.m. and we would pitch different ideas, and the people would form teams, and then we would demo it at 6 p.m.
Right.
And this was after we had done some evaluation process of using existing tools. Yeah. And sort of ideating and then doing a design session of what we liked and didn't like in those tools. And so Twitter and a dozen other product ideas came out of those hackathons. And so in early days, when you look at Twitter, you're like, oh, I could build this in a day. And it's like, we did too.
Oh.
Amazingly, there is a video of the demo of Twitter when it was 6 hours old.
Oh, really?
And we don't have the video. It never got uploaded online because YouTube didn't exist. So we digitized the video and sent it on the local file share network. And so I have emails in my Gmail, because that's still around, saying go to this local file service to watch the video of the demo. No one has the demo. We've lost it. So what happened is we did that for about 6 or 8 weeks. I can't remember how long. And some of those products seemed interesting. And so what we did with those products is we said, okay, 2 of them, we're going to spin up little teams to work on, and we're going to keep working on the podcasting thing. Because we don't quite want to shut it down. And one of them was a Periscope-like video sharing tool for uploading and sharing video to MySpace. You could do 6 or 12-second videos. I can't remember how long. And we called it Hellodio. And another, initially we didn't have a name, and so people joked that it was called Friendstalker. But we never launched with that name. That was just a joke name. And that's the one that became Twitter.
Oh, really?
And the name Twitter actually is a word in the English dictionary. And Noah actually sat with a giant Oxford English dictionary in the back of the office, starting with A, looking at every word in the Oxford. Like, he spent 2 weeks on it or something. Like, a lot of time in the back, saying, is this word the name for our product? And Twitter is a word in English, which is like those little messages that bird songs, like, little bits of communication between birds. But we didn't want to buy the domain name Twitter because someone wanted to sell it and it was like $15,000. So we registered twttr.com. No vowels. And we put it under one of the engineers, like, we put the name for the domain name registry on one of the engineers on the team who was most excited about it. That was Jack Dorsey.
Right.
And so he kind of became the founding CEO of Twitter by accident. He was the engineer on the team who was most enthusiastic about the Twitter idea. And he was part of the team, but we pitched 3 or 4 ideas that were nearly identical at the time. But he was really into it, and he is super smart and drove forward. And so the initial team that we spun off to work on Twitter was, Jack Dorsey, Noah Glass, and Florian Weber. Now, no one remembers who Florian and Noah are, because Noah was pushed out by Ev, and then Ev eventually pushed out Jack, and then Jack pushed out Ev, and there's a whole bunch of drama, and there's TV shows about it and all these other things like that. And Florian was this German developer who was working on it, super talented, who was like, yeah, I'm ready to move on. And a bunch of us, none of us thought that Twitter was going to be successful.
Right.
Like, that's why Jack was made CEO. It was like, this is a side project, and we're going to have to do a bunch of other side projects. And maybe one of these are going to come out and work. But we don't know which one of these is going to work, and we don't know when and how. And so the entire idea was it would be a product lab that would build new products. And so the company was recapped and renamed from Odeo to Obvious and Obvious Ventures. And it was obvious that they should just keep trying new things, and eventually became Twitter Inc. And so that's the story. But I guess the other really important thing is, like, it was a pivot. It's like the most classic pivot. And there's a TechCrunch article saying, I don't know if Ev Williams is the smartest or the stupidest person in the history of Silicon Valley. Because we walked away from podcasting.
Yeah.
We were the dominant company in podcasting. And podcasting is a thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Could have been, bigger than Twitter.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Well, what an amazing story. And I heard that you actually employed or brought Jack Dorsey in. Is that true?
So we hired Jack not when the company first started. He started a year in when my now ex-wife quit. So she was a Python developer and working on it, and she quit because she was like, this is a boys club and I want to go do something else, and I'm tired of working at the startup all the time. And that's when we hired Jack. And so the funny thing is, the other person we considered seriously and we tried to hire to bring in was Moxie Marlinspike, who created Signal.
Right.
And the encryption protocol behind WhatsApp. And
really?
So, there was a time when there weren't that many people doing stuff that was super interesting, and we all kind of hung out. The other person on the team who people don't know was Kevin Systrom, who was our intern helping with the pitch deck to investors. And we wanted Kevin to keep working with us. Like, Kevin was amazing. Instead, he quit and started Instagram.
Well, that wasn't a bad move.
No.
What an amazing team. Like, looking back, just absolutely amazing. And how long did you stay? And when did you actually leave? At what point?
I was there from 2004 to 2006.
And why did you leave?
I left because I felt like startups, you burn out in startups. And 2, I felt like we walked away from podcasting. Like, we didn't talk to our users enough. Like, I was there because I believed in podcasting. I believed in democratizing the media. And I felt like we walked away from it. So I left there and went over to work with the Flickr team, Katerina Fake, who had just been acquired by Yahoo. But I literally just moved across the street. Because it seemed to me at the time like Flickr was going to have a bigger future.
I remember Flickr. Yeah. So now looking back on that time and then leaving, do you have any regrets? I mean, how do you feel about that?
So I exercised my stock options, but when the company was recapitalized, I accepted the buyout offer, and I shouldn't have. Like, if I have one regret, it's that I didn't put my foot down and say, no, you roll my stock over to the new company. That's my regret. My other regret is, at the time, I didn't want to be a manager. So my role was more like CTO. And so my regret is thinking that I should stay there and just be an engineer, as opposed to learning the other things. And since then, I have learned how to manage people and how to deal with the business side of things. And
it's a progression, isn't it?
And so I at the time was like, no, I just want to be an engineer. I don't want to deal with the people issues, everything else. And I think it would have been a great chance to learn and grow in that way.
Exactly.
So I regret those two things. And some of the folks on the team, there was a chance to leave, and a bunch of us sort of left at the same time. Some of the folks who left really stayed better connected, kept coming into the office. So Tony Stubblebine, who's now CEO of Medium, he and I left at the same time. But he kept showing up and just kept engaging and kept participating. And so what I didn't realize at the time, and what I have learned since then, is that one of the secret sauces of Silicon Valley and of startups is that it's not about the companies. It's about your coworkers and your teams and the people. And so you find people you like to work with. You find people who are smart. You find people who have networks. You find people who are creative and weird. And they have to be weird, because otherwise they would just get a normal job. They'll go work at Google or whatever.
Yeah, exactly.
And that network matters more than anything else. And so if you look at it, you have that network that were blogger folks who became Twitter folks who moved to other things. A great example of this is the Flickr team. Half of that Flickr team went to go run Etsy. The other half quit and started this company called Glitch, which itself pivoted to be Slack.
Oh, really?
So the companies, Glitch failed. Flickr failed its way into getting acquired, but then didn't end up in the right spot. But the people that worked at those companies continue to collaborate with each other and build new important things. And so you don't pick the company, you pick your coworkers, and you pick the network, because those networks build out your career. The other major lesson of Twitter is that Twitter was not an innovative company. Twitter was fundamentally not innovative. What Twitter was really good at making space that included other people. So early on in the company, we had people who came in, they worked in the office, they did design work, they did collaboration, everything else. We're like, are you an employee? And they're like, no, but I think this is fun and I'm hanging out. So it was a very open space. Like, the front door was open and people wondered. And sometimes it'd be, this guy Dunstan whose day job was designing Apple.com's homepage. And he's like, I want to do some more interesting design work. And he did design work for us. And sometimes it'd be a homeless person and we have to shuttle them back out. But that culture is what meant that when people started really using Twitter, and they started doing @ before your username, and started doing hashtags, and started doing retweets, and started doing tweet streams and putting links to images and links to video and short links and search. All of those things, everything we think of as Twitter today was the users of Twitter figuring out how to use this platform that was super flexible and interesting. And then the company just looking at how people use their tool and supporting it. And so that's the trick is like, amazing. Listen to your users. Don't fight your users. Make them part of the thing. And users of Twitter, like when someone says, I joined Twitter or I left Twitter, they're not talking about being an employee. They're talking about being a user. But the language and the ideas, it's almost like they were an employee.
And, that's fascinating.
And so if you can do that, then you have all of your users or all of your customers are super fans because they feel ownership of it.
Wow, it's an amazing story. And everything that's come out of that from all the people that were involved as well. It's quite amazing. Like so many startups and big projects. It must have been a really amazing time and space to work in. Very exciting, I'm guessing. And just being part of that, like the creation of Twitter, you know, how has it shaped or changed your life or your career trajectory? Has it, because of that, has it changed what you do and your life itself, being known as the person that started Twitter?
So oddly enough, the knowledge, you know, Twitter wasn't a big deal when I left, but Twitter became a big deal over time, and the network around it of the people I met through Twitter while I was working on Odeo and we were working on Twitter, that is absolutely shaped my career. And I feel incredibly lucky. So sometimes people ask me, you know, are you upset that you didn't roll over your stock and that they also like, yeah, sure, of course. It'd be nice to have that huge amount of money. But the experience and the connection and understanding the history and being part of it and all the things I learned from that and being able to build something that had that level of impact on the world, that's way more valuable than any money. Money is useful because it's a, you know, it's nice to not feel broke. It's nice not to have a job where you're having to do something that you don't like. Yeah. But, you know, it's a force multiplier. But if one thing I learned about looking at people who did make lots of money is it is just that. It's a force multiplier. If you're not happy, if you're not grounded, if you're not figuring out what you're doing with your life and everything else, and all of a sudden you have hundreds of millions or billions of dollars, you're just unhappy at a massive scale.
And why do you think that is?
Or if you've got solid relationships or you've got meaning in your life, then it lets you operate at a massive scale on that.
Yeah. I remember once I was at a seminar and someone was saying, look, you know, money, if you think money can change people, like if someone, well, they said if someone's a dickhead, they'll just be a bigger dickhead. Yep. And if someone's a really good person, then they can do a lot more good. So I guess that's the case. But yeah, money doesn't make you happy. That's, you know, that's a bit of a myth, I think. But if you have a lot of money, you can use it to, you know, help other startups that are in the space or whatever you want, absolutely. I guess. So, you know, no regrets of not being a multi-billionaire.
It would have been nice, but no regrets. I feel incredibly lucky to have played an active role in a part of it. They did a study on people who are Olympic medalists, and the happiest person is the bronze medalist.
Right, that's interesting.
So the gold medalist is happy because they're number one.
Yeah.
this the silver medalist is the least happy medalist because they look at gold and they say, I almost got gold.
Yeah,
I almost
yeah.
got the top thing.
Yeah.
The bronze medalist looks at it and go, holy shit, I could have been fourth.
That's so true. Yes.
And so in my case, I didn't know that those startups I worked on would be so important. I could have picked different startups. I could have picked different teams. And you never know. To give you an example, I had a chance to join GitHub when they had a few employees. I think my GitHub user is number 62.
Right.
I had no idea that GitHub would be worth so much. It would be so successful. And so, and I didn't work on GitHub. Just my friends did. The trick is give yourself those opportunities. Put yourself in a position where you're working with interesting people. And it's not just you. And realize that it's never the idea. It's always the execution and the people. The farther you get from Silicon Valley, the more people think the idea matters and that the idea is important. And I'm not going to tell you. And, I'm going to put these NDAs and everything else and someone's going to steal my idea. Ideas are worthless. Execution is everything. And startups are a team sport. So we do hero worshiping. This podcast is great. There's all these stories and everything else. And yes, I'm an entrepreneur and I go through and I put more risk on myself than anyone else. And I have failures and successes and investors invest in me. But the real answer is that it's a team sport. And so it's about which team do you want to be on? And how do you find the right teammates? Because you're going to do it together.
That's beautiful advice, particularly for new or early stage startup founders. Is building up that network, getting on the right teams, building up that credibility. It's so important. I remember once talking about the right networks, and you were saying at the right parties. The fellow here that I knew, he created the music score for Avatar, and I was talking to him with another friend of mine who was doing in the music industry and trying to get ahead. And he said, how can I get ahead? What tips do you have? And he just said, go to barbecues. We're like, what do you mean? Just go to the barbecues. I'll invite you where all the people in the industry hang out, and then you just keep going. And then after a while, say, hey, we need a musician for this score for that movie. And, are you available? So it's pretty much works like that. So, he didn't follow that up, unfortunately. He said, oh, no, I got to, that sort of mentality. I won't do that. I got to do it myself, do it the hard way. So, all right. So I was just wondering, your name, Rabble, is your nickname. It's intriguing. Could you share the story behind the name? Sure.
So remember how I was saying in 2004, I was helping do a bunch of stuff for people protesting against George W. Bush and the invasion in Iraq. And one of the websites that I ran at the time, still have it, but there's not much there. It's called protest.net. And it was a calendar of activist stuff. And I didn't want to put my name on it because it's organizing a protest. So I put Rabble Rousers as the fake email address. They went to me.
Okay.
But Unix file names, usernames, can't have a hyphen in them. They have to be shorter and everything else. And so the username became Rabble. And so when I went to go make a blog, somehow that name ended up on the blog because it was my username on the server.
Yeah.
When we went to go found Odeo, there was Noah Glass, Evan Williams, and myself, Evan Henshaw-Blatt. And so we had 2 Evans out of the 3 people. So Evan Williams had used Ev as his name on his blog. Yeah. So he just went by Ev. And I'd used Rabble on my blog when I wanted to put my real name on it. So I went by Rabble. And so neither one of us went by Evan, and it eliminated the confusion in the company.
Yeah, that can be an issue.
And so, especially when there's only 3 people. And so as we were working and going to conferences and talking to people, everyone in the office started calling me Rabble. And I thought it was kind of cool. And so it just stuck.
Yeah, it is a cool
name.
But
it wasn't like, oh, I should call myself this. It just happened. And the reason it happened was literally because we had a naming conflict around Evan and you know, in the startup.
And do you still keep up with any of those guys from the early days, with Jack Dorsey or any of the others from the Twitter
Absolutely. Jack's the primary funder of my company right now.
Awesome.
He lives in Costa Rica now.
All right.
But yeah, we keep up. Blaine Cook, who was the original architect, is a close friend. We hang out. Tony Stebelbein, who was the engineering manager, is now CEO of Medium. A few of the other folks, Ray was the designer, and Adam does business development. We get together. The only person who liked everybody is BizStone. Like, there were lots of like back and forth and fighting and positions like that, and like back and forth. And so there were all these like weird little teeny factions and things like that. There were the engineers, and then there were the business people and whatnot. But Biz likes everyone, gets along with everyone. And I do keep in touch with stuff, and we get together. But there's no like big reunion.
Okay. Not like a once a year reunion.
No, because there was so much bad blood over time as Ev fired Noah, then fired Jack, and then Jack fired Ev, and then...
Tell us a bit more about that. That's so interesting. Like, how did this all happen?
Noah's the original founder of the company. He's the guy who said, I want to do audio and the podcasting thing. He was the vision behind it. He's the one who said we should do these hackathons. He's the one who came up with the name Twitter. And what happened was he threw himself so completely into the startup that his marriage fell apart.
Oh, no.
And Ev decided that he would be a liability. And because Ev Williams was the original investor and the money guy behind it, because he'd sold Blogger to Google, he actually went in and fired his friend. He decided that Noah was going to be a liability. And it wasn't good. Now, Noah probably was going to be a liability, but it wasn't handled well. And then Ev wanted to do a product lab where they built a whole bunch of products and not just Twitter. And so that's why Jack was named CEO of one of the products, which was Twitter. And then Twitter grew into sort of overtaking everything. And Jack became the CEO. And Jack had never managed anyone in his life before then. And so eventually Ev stepped in with the majority of the shareholders and the board and fired Jack and took his position as CEO. And then the board, as Twitter continued to grow, decided that Ev wasn't qualified to be CEO. And so they had brought in this guy, Dick Costello. And Dick was an early blogger guy, and he'd sold a company to Google. And he's super personable, and he had to decide whether or not he was going to go with Second City and be like a comic and go on Saturday Night Live or do startups. So they brought Dick in, who's super competent, as COO. And then the funny thing is, Dick Costello's first tweet after joining as COO literally says, joining as COO of Twitter, task 1, undermine CEO and replace them. Which is exactly what he did.
That's so unbelievable.
So he organized a boardroom coup, got Ev Williams fired. But when Jack had been fired by Ev earlier, Ev didn't remove Jack's Twitter email address and kept him on the board. So after Jack got fired, he's like, well, he didn't know what he was going to do at first. So he went around and did a whole bunch of press stuff. He's like, well, I'm not an employee. You know, I'm just on the board. But I can do a bunch of press stuff. Positive things.
Uh-huh.
And then he meets some people who are figuring out how to do credit card processing, the audio jack on the phone, and starts Square, which becomes Block, which becomes a successful company. And he used his network and everything to make that happen, and his design skills. And he got coaching, so he learned how to be a manager.
Okay.
So then Dick Costello's CEO has kicked Ev out and doesn't know why Twitter is successful. Like, it's a mess. And because he isn't a founding team member and he doesn't know why it's successful, he's not able to break things in the right way to make it a successful company. A couple years later, Jack has now proved through Square that he can build a real business. He got the coaching. He got the training. He did the reading. He did the work. He learned how to manage people.
Yeah.
He grew.
Yeah.
And Jack deserves so much credit for that because he went from a nerdy, shy engineer on the team to someone who can found to build a company and take it public. So when he did that, the Twitter folks are like, we don't have direction in the company. And so the board brings him back in as a product lead person. And he's still running Block and Square, but he's also at Twitter. And he sets them up so they're across the street from each other. Then the board is like, Dick Costello is not finding the business model here. He's not able to fix things. So then they bring Jack in as CEO again and kick Dick out. And you know what Dick Costello does?
What?
He becomes a screenwriter for the Silicon Valley TV show.
No, I was just going to say, it is just like a soap opera.
It's totally soap
Everything
opera.
is going on.
It is more than that because at the time when Twitter was first standing, after Gaba, my ex, left, there were only two other women in the office. There was Sarah, who's Ev's wife, and she sort of did work sometimes and sort of didn't. And then there was Crystal, who ran customer support and trust and safety. Anyway, Jack really wanted to go out on a date with Crystal, but Crystal ends up going on a date and marrying Goldman, who's Ev's best friend.
Oh,
and so no one talks about Crystal, but Crystal hired the most people in the company. Was the founding team member who was around the longest. Super important. She never talks to the public. But she's super badass.
What an amazing story.
But once Jack got brought back in, and once he learned how to be a manager, and he had to learn that stuff. Like, we don't get born that way. He learned that. He learned how to be a really good entrepreneur. He had the desire, but he learned it. And he studied, and he found mentors, and he found coaches, and he talked to people, and he learned how to recruit the right people and set them up and make it successful. Then the board trusted him to bring back in, and for the most part, he saved Twitter. But, and he fought off hedge funds that were trying to take over and everything else. But here's the real reason why Elon Musk was able to take over. Ev didn't have super voting shares. And every time they had to flip over who was the CEO, the power shifted to the board and the investors and the company executives and the founders had less and less shares. So by the time Elon Musk took over, Ev and Jack and the other folks who were still like the entire founding team had less than 10% of the company and less than 10% of the votes. And so there were Elliott Capital and Silver Lake who kept threatening, and they had board seats. They kept threatening to take over. And so Jack was an impossible situation because his real money all came from Square. That's the paying job. He never got paid to be the CEO back at Twitter. But Twitter was important. And these hedge funds got themselves a seat on the board, and they kept wanting to take it over, and they wanted to, they thought they could monetize it better. They didn't realize how vulnerable Twitter was. And so when Jack said, I think Elon Musk is the singular person who can save Twitter, it's because not because he thought Elon Musk could do it, but because he knew that Twitter's position with its ownership structure and hedge funds wanting to come and take it over, they're going to come in and they're going to be a bull in a china shop, and they're not going to understand how fragile it is. And they're going to see Twitter's giant brand and not realize that Twitter hasn't found the business model that really works. It doesn't have the cash cow of Instagram or TikTok or Facebook. What we didn't realize is that Elon Musk would try and run Twitter himself, as opposed to being the finance guy in the public face and like let professionals do it. In his other companies, he doesn't run them day to day. He doesn't run SpaceX. He doesn't run Tesla. He doesn't run Neuralink. He doesn't run the Boring Company. He makes sure there's the money, and he's the spokesperson, and he does the really important recruiting. But because he was a user of Twitter, he thought he could run Twitter, and he can't because it's really hard. And so he screwed it up, and we lost it.
I mean, he didn't he fire like 80% of the development team on the first day or something?
Yeah, he fired a huge number of people really, really quickly, and but he didn't fire them in ways that were right. He's like, who's written the most lines of code? Okay, you can stay. It wasn't wrong to clean house, but he did it in the wrong way.
Yeah, and then renaming it and change. I mean, I remember I was on Twitter when he took over, and I was like, I saw so many of his tweets answering people all over the place. I think, this guy must be on like 24/7 full time. How can he actually be that engaged? Is there anything else that you wanted to talk about or you think would be good?
No, I mean, the main ones is, the standard lessons of talk to your customers and realize you know nothing and the people you work with matter.
Yeah, absolutely. So the last question is, look, I'm sure, you often get asked about the Twitter story because it's such an amazing story and Twitter has become so huge. However, what story from your life do you wish people would ask you that no one has ever asked you?
I think, so in the time between when I sold my first startup in 2000 and when I joined Odeo in 2004, I spent a bunch of time traveling around the world and doing research stuff. And that time was simply working on the next project. I was a digital nomad for 4 years, and I ended up helping all of these activist groups. And I ended up like meeting and getting to know like Evo Morales, who was later elected president of Bolivia. I brought computers to set up computer labs for the Zapatistas in Mexico. I did a bunch of those stuff, and all of those weird things, all those things that are not directly related to the career of learning how to, I smuggled stuff, but it was computers, or setting up computer labs, or solving problems, or getting to know folks, or learning a second language, very, very non-traditional type things. And that stuff's all really valuable. Like I think that be adventurous and try things and be willing to fail and don't have the same path as everybody else, because having the same path as everyone else leads to boring companies that aren't very interesting. And so do something unique and different, and that'll give you unique insight. And so that's something that, one time I was at a conference organized by Telefonica in Madrid, and it was a very big conference center, very corporate. And someone got up and asked, how do we get Silicon Valley in Madrid? And my answer was, one, Silicon Valley exists in Silicon Valley for random reasons. Shockley, the guy who created the first semiconductor, and there they go. He moved to Palo Alto because he wanted to live near his mom.
Right.
We could talk about Stanford and UC Berkeley and innovation, everything else, but truth of the matter is, he could pick anywhere in the United States he wanted to live, and he was super smart, Nobel Prizes and all that other stuff. But he just picked Palo Alto because that's where his mom lived, and it's nice and the weather's nice, and he wanted to live near his mom. The reason it stayed and grew was because that they didn't have the restrictions of the East Coast of the proper establishment. And it kept growing because that was one of the centers of the counterculture. The hippies and people doing acid and everything else. And so, the growth there, from the outside, you see uber capitalism. But inside, what happened was a merger of alternative social movements and alternative lifestyles of folks, and queer folks in San Francisco and the Castro, and people dropping acid, and people going down to these research labs and doing new stuff, and people trying polyamory and all sorts of things like that. The whole Burning Man thing. Burning Man isn't a weird thing that Silicon Valley does. Burning Man, in many ways, is essential to understanding it and essential to creating it. And so you can't get a vibrant startup culture if you've got a group of people who are looking for day jobs. You can't get a vibrant startup culture when you've got a group of people who want cultural continuity with their parents. You have to be willing to try drugs, try new kinds of relationships, new ways of living, new ways of collaborating. You've got to be willing to throw out all the existing ideas and build something new. And that is why we think of startup culture as utopian. And it is also why it is uniquely more successful than elsewhere. And, there's lots of talk about Silicon Valley's ideology being libertarian, but it is only some of them who are right-wing libertarians. There's also the majority of Silicon Valley who are libertarian social democrats, who are willing to throw away the norms and build something new, willing to throw away the collaboration, build something new. And so what we need to do is we need to find a way to embrace that and support it and not punish people from being weird and freaky. The team at Twitter that made Twitter, we didn't go to the fanciest schools. We were really weird. And we all brought different things to it. And that's what made it work. And that diversity. And it wasn't diversity, in terms of gender or other things, diversity of perspectives on stuff. And the reason that Facebook was successful and Google was successful and all these other companies is because they set themselves up in a place where that kind of craziness could happen. And people would be open to those ideas and aren't punished for having those ideas. And no one's punished for failure.
Yeah, and that's the big thing, isn't it? That's so important. Yeah. Well, that's really, your story is really amazing, Rabble, and really appreciate you being
on. Thank you so much. It's been very
taking
fun.
the time. Yeah, from beautiful New Zealand, or should I say New Zealand, with the correct accent. It's wonderful. And I'm sure this podcast, this episode will help a lot of other founders, particularly looking back at everything that happened in those early days, and so much wisdom coming out of that. And hearing your story was amazing. Really appreciate your time and your wisdom, your knowledge. Very
Thank you
much.
so much for
Thank
reaching
you
out.
so
It was a
much
real pleasure.
Are you enjoying this podcast? Then please do me a huge favor and become part of the 12% of viewers that have hit that subscribe button. This helps me tremendously to grow my channel and in turn help early stage startup founders on their journey.